Well, now that I finished this game, of course that means it's time. I'm finally ready to do a proper quick scope review. Yeah, sadly, when Inti Creates provided us with the review key so we can get a head start on our content, I was pretty sick. I was able to put out a first look as well as a short that gives a bit of background on this game, so we don't need to dwell too much on those details. But yeah, let's get into it. I will say, it was about a year ago when Inti Creates took their Galgun universe and made a spin-off series that emulates that big Metroidvania energy. Gal Guardian's Demon Purge initially released on February 6th, 2023, and in 2025 we got the sequel, Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark. In this new game, players get to seamlessly swap between demon maids Kirika and Masha, while their beloved master Maxim is now relegated to a life as a floating head who aids them with various powers. And as I said, this game will feel very familiar to the Metroidvania Castlevania games like Symphony of the Night. There are a total of 7 unique areas to explore in addition to a few castles and towns. What I'm happy to say is that this game earns marks for map diversity, as I didn't find any of the locations to be dull. There would be nothing worse than a Metroidvania with uninteresting level design, so thankfully they absolutely delivered on this front. And as we continue, we're gonna move through several key points on my thoughts on Servants of the Dark, starting with my love-hate relationship with the genre as a whole. Metroidvanias have always been a genre that I could admire. The idea of a freely explorable 2D platforming world is mouthwatering to say the least, and yet they always feel so overwhelming. I can barely count on one hand the Metroidvania games that I actually finished, because there feels like way too much content for you to do, in addition to running into dead ends and painstakingly having to explore around for that one item or block or switch or whatever it is that is holding your progress. I said it once, I'll say it 100 times, I'm mostly an OG platformer fan rather than this style, so starting any Metroidvania is going to be a tall order for me personally. But luckily, from my experience, Servants of the Dark was able to combat a good amount of those pain points of the genre. Yes, I still had to scour the board for that crucial, unexplored square in order to advance forward in the story. There was also a lot of backtracking, and at times I really wish there were more teleport points scattered about the map. I even on one, maybe 2 occasions had to look something up. However, as I played more and more, it became apparent that this is a far more digestible Metroidvania for those of us that have a hard time in this category. Especially once you get a good feel for the mechanics of this game, you can develop your own flow that will help you out a lot. What also helps a lot is one of the later abilities where you can basically run at breakneck speed and kill almost anything in your way. This is where exploration really opens up for Servants of the Dark. And it's at this point I would like to talk about the gameplay and abilities that you get. While most Metroidvanias have a very familiar setup, exploration is aided by unlocking double jumps and faster ways of getting around. You're also typically using a non-projectile weapon to go around and kill enemies to gain experience and level up further. Servants includes all of this with very super reliable tight controls. I especially enjoyed making little platforming challenges for myself, like seeing if I could make this jump. Here I only had the one double jump, and you can see how when the player pushes delaying their input enough, you may still not have enough to reach the elevated platform. It took maximum precision to pull off this jump, and moments like these make a game really fun for me. But so much more than just the controls, where I think Servants of the Dark really shines is in the abilities that the demon maids will get throughout the game. I mentioned earlier that at this point I only had a single double jump ability. By the end of the game, you can double jump and dash after a double jump about 4 to 5 times consecutively. It's really quite useful and again opens the game up. And eventually you can even assign an upgrade that allows you to double that, because you can then swap to the other maid, which refreshes the amount of double jumps you can do, effectively going from about 4 to 5 to about 8 or 9. Yeah, activate that upgrade and it is a bad day to be a hard out of reach place. I already mentioned the demon running ability, but it really cannot be overstated how useful this is when you need to backtrack. I mean, look at this, I could just run through levels without too much of a care in the world. it also ends up being how you can clear through these pesky miasma vines. I love how they have an ability that is so multi-purpose and assists players in a few different key ways. However, don't think that you can use it to delete the bosses. They already thought of that, and the demon running ability does not work on them. What also was cool was they added special attacks for each maid. Masha has a special projectile that she can throw out, which is actually monumental if you want to get through the game, since it can be used to clear the lava if you use the Ice Seed. Masha also can break her simple combo attack by backdashing, which was a pretty cool idea. It would have been nice if she could backdash a little further, or if you could upgrade it, since some of the time enemies will still be able to close the distance and hit Masha. I'm thinking about it, I'm actually not sure if maybe there was an upgrade that I just completely missed, but it was a really cool maneuver for the character nonetheless. And Kirika gets a straight up shotgun, which is needed, because if I could complain for a second, I felt like Kirika's base gun attack was really underpowered. I mean, each bullet must be made from soda crackers, because they just look at how much of her attack it takes to kill one enemy. The shotgun is a bit better, but I still feel overall Kirika is deserving of a buff for her attack power. One of the main things that drew me to the original Gal Guardians was because I thought it would be cool to play a Symphony of the Night style game, but with an anime character that has an Uzi. So I was a little underwhelmed, and honestly found myself relying on Masha more. So much that 90% of my revives were for Masha. I would find myself switching from Masha to Kirika because Masha was almost downed, and of course, when I did, Kirika had full health or basically full health. I hated to see the more interesting playable character relegated to benchwarmer in many areas of the game. There was one section where I suddenly needed to rely on Kirika more than Masha for her gun ability, but yeah, it was typically the other way around, and I wasn't too happy about that. Because of her underpowered attack, I just naturally didn't feel as confident zipping around the stages with Kirika, since the other maid could much more easily mow down enemies. The characters also contribute to an equally enjoyable story. I love a good revenge arc, and the setup that our mighty king has fallen, and the fate of the land falls on the shoulders of his two maids while all he can do is float and offer demon power assists is hilarious. By comparison with Demon Purge, I really wasn't as interested in that story. However, for context, I never finished that game all the way, so this may just be my motivation to backtrack in the Galgun spin-off story and replay that title as well. The style in this game is all in order too. In addition to some great tunes that match that Metroidvania exploring through a castle vibe, they put a ton of cool effects on screen. Although the game is pixel-based with beautifully animated sprites, there are a lot of these effects that push little details like swapping characters or using special attacks to another level. With Servants specifically, I had an overall realization that visually, Inti Creates puts out games that I want to play and appreciate. I think back to one of my favorite games of all time, Bloodstained: Curse of the Moon, which was published by Inti, and just like with that game, there is so much to look at here. Now, as far as cons go, there are two things that I would like to mention. Firstly, I think design-wise, they had some very simple and easy to fix issues, one of which was that certain things just weren't explained well. Unfortunately, some of the abilities weren't explained on how the player is supposed to use them. For example, the inputs. So when it came time to utilize them, I wasn't sure and had to look it up online. And also, allow me to set this next one up. I'm going to be perfectly blunt here. The idea of taking Castlevania-inspired gameplay, Symphony of the Night style, and giving players an Uzi gets me reaching for the trusty old forehead sweat rag. Seriously, there's probably nothing more I could ask that could improve these kinds of games than adding a cool projectile-based weapon. But just like with Demon's Purge, like I said before, bullets just flat don't do enough damage. It doesn't feel balanced, and so most of the time I just ended up relying on Masha, despite initially being more interested in playing the ranged attack type character for one of these games. There were various things like that in this game where I felt that design-wise it was just a little bit held back. But it wasn't enough to take away from the overall experience of Gal Guardian Servants of the Dark for me. Wrapping things up, the game definitely hooked me and changed my mind a bit on the genre, which I think is impressive. though it's still hard for me to fight the frustration of hitting multiple branching paths every other screen in these style of games. You know, that's just a me thing. I think Servants was a great choice for me for games to play in 2025 and could serve as a pivotal moment to allow me to really get into Metroidvanias finally. The length of this game was perfect for me and gamers like me because it didn't really overstay its welcome like some other Metroidvanias tend to do. They provided plenty of challenge and incentive to unlock more skills and explore more of the map. And the game looks and sounds amazing too, with a climax that is fittingly a super intense final boss fight. Seriously, I would recommend stocking up on your healing items. Oh, and I would also like to mention, just how I was brought up in our first look video, we didn't end up using the co-op function, but that would be another great option for you as well. I can't speak to how the co-op works in it, but being able to play a Metroidvania with local split-screen co-op, I think that's a feature that these games really could benefit from. So, needless to say, there's plenty to enjoy in Gal Guardian's Servants of the Dark. If you do like the idea of flying through a Metroidvania with a good helping of anime thrown in, I would highly recommend checking out this game because frankly, I think Inti Creates did a really fine job here. And I hope you guys think we did a fine job with this video. Definitely let us know in the comments below. Are you a fan of Inti Creates? Do you like Metroidvanias? Do you run into some of the same issues that I do whenever I play Metroidvanias, to the point that I always feel like I have to bring it up? We definitely want to hear more about that. And yeah, be sure to be on the lookout for more Two Stupid Gamers content. We have plenty of more videos, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more of our awesome content, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video.